Hi, and welcome to Valhalla Games Podcast, Episode 6. This episode, Dan and I are going to talk about our painting workflow and how we get our models from bare plastic or bare steel right down to on the tabletop looking beautiful. For beginning painters, you should get lots and lots of tips here, but for you seasoned veterans, you may even pick something up as well. Also, Dan and I find a point of difference and draw a demarcation line. Find out all about that and whether you belong to Team Dan or Team Rex.
I'm gonna say something. Joe. 10 of Winters. What is it? Mission to speak, sir. Mission granted. Sir, we got 9 companies, sir. Yeah, we do. Well, how come we're the only company marching every Friday night, 12 miles full pack in the pitch dark?
Why do you think, Private Ranneman?
Lieutenant Sobel hates us, sir.
Lieutenant Sobel does not hate Easy Company, Private Ranneman. He just hates you.
Thank you, sir.
Righto, Dan. So the thing I wanted to discuss this podcast episode was your and my painting workflow. So by painting workflow, I mean not necessarily the details of exactly which way you highlight and which way you hold your brush and all of that, but I guess just an overview of your painting process from beginning to end. Now, I guess all painting starts at first with an inspiration. Did you want to tell us about your inspiration?
Yeah, look, I think I get inspiration from plenty of places. When I was little, I had this book collecting model soldiers, and I remember it clearly that had a picture of a dragoon or something like that. I think it was American War of Independence. He was jumping over some hedge or some fence, and it was a white book, and it had this beautiful painted miniature in it. And in the background of the miniature, it had some scenery and like a background, a backdrop of like a sky or something like that. And for me, when I find inspiration for painting my miniatures, it's always beautifully painted miniatures, but in their environment, I find so inspiring. So I get inspired the most by blogs that have finalized pictures of miniatures in their finished environment, or YouTube vids of maybe really good game shows that have got miniatures in that really photo quality sort of environment. I love seeing videos from people who've visited Salute or Crisis, or some of the American shows that are concentrating on really sort of upping that barrier, that terrain level. So for me, it's looking at those and looking at books like codices for Warhammer 40,000, or army books, or rule books, or things like that have really got well-painted miniatures in their environment, and that just inspires me to want to play my games and do some terrain, and then paint more models, and then do some more terrain to get to that level. How about you?
Yeah, all those things that you said. And for me, a lot of it's magazines. I buy, and I think I mentioned this last episode, I buy way too many magazines, more than a man could ever read. But certainly I love to look at the pictures. And some of the painting in those magazines is just phenomenal. And of course, I guess, well, perhaps not of course, but one of the best is White Dwarf.
Yeah, definitely.
So not a game system that I play, but oh my gosh, you can just, it really is a cut above a lot of the stuff that you see that's out there. The stuff that they do is just absolutely phenomenal. I guess aided by the fact that their sculpts are well, can I be rude and not get hate mail, but second to none their sculpting and casting process. I'm sure helps it, but those guys are so dedicated, and girls are so dedicated.
Yeah, I think so. I think at some stages their studio team sort of has created photography that's replicated models. Like they've got a lot of smoke and mirrors on the table, and especially in apocalypse pictures, and they recreate squads in different areas that are the same squad, the same photograph. But underneath that sort of facade, you can actually see many, many, many more pictures and many more publications of really high quality stuff that has got backdrops and stuff like that. And the stuff's exceptional. And once you've visited Warhammer World, oh man, it's just, when you go there and you see the love and the attention put into what are essentially, what are dioramas for you to walk around, it's just like a palace of war games there. Their own systems, of course, and we'd love to see other systems, but obviously we understand why it's like that. But there really is, I'll use this word, majestic sort of creations that they've created there. It's just absolutely inspiring. So that's definitely an add one to the list, yeah.
Yeah, I saw the photos from where you went, and it was absolutely outstanding. So that's at presumably Games Workshop HQ around Nottingham somewhere, is it?
Yeah, that's right.
There? I'm not
yep,
sure.
It's in Lenton and Nottingham. I've been there 2 or 3 times now. It's just absolutely fantastic. If you're in the lead belt of Nottingham in the UK, if you're going to the UK, I totally recommend going there and seeing it just as a wargamer. Just no one's saying buy anything. Just as a wargamer, just go to their castle courtyard that is their games room. The massive event room that they have, and then go through their museum. You will not regret it, no matter what game system you play.
Sounds good. Some of the other things that I enjoy are other magazines as well. Wargame Soldiers and Strategies, Wargames Illustrated, both on occasion have some absolutely fantastic images. And it is interesting though, as your painting improves, and I guess this is probably a point for a disclaimer. I'm certainly not anybody's best painter. You're a lot better than me, Dan, but I'm sure there's people that are way more skilled than us, right?
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt, yeah, definitely.
But it's interesting. Initially, when I started looking at Wargames magazines, everything seemed just completely beyond reach. But now, as I guess have improved, you don't sort of notice it in yourself. But I do notice that sometimes when I look at magazines now, I go, yeah, they probably could have spent a little bit of time on that one. Which I guess is good. That means that I'm a little bit more discerning than what I used to be, and I'm getting an eye for it, which is fantastic. So there's a muscle memory, but as well as that, actually having an eye to be able to see and spot when something is not quite right. And then I guess the last thing is actually realizing what's not right with it on your own models, so that you can have an idea of what to do to fix it up.
Yeah, you go through this phase where it can seem daunting, and you're in awe of it, is phase 2. So daunting.
Sorry, did you mention Brian Cook just there?
Yeah, and so you're in awe of it, and you're that's phase 2. Phase 3 is you start to understand, and you can see the colours, and you can see the techniques used. And phase 4 is replicating it yourself, and phase 5 is analysing it and going, what if I was to do that myself, what areas would I improve, if anything? Because there are certainly some people out there that I just look at and just think, nah, just please keep producing that content for us. I'm inhaling it as fast as I can, and I want more. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, so just for Brian's purpose, in case someone's listening to this podcast and is a mate of Brian's, we absolutely love his work. But man, sometimes when I look at it, I just go, oh, that's just completely unachievable. But it's something to aspire to, and certainly he's my favourite painter, and I look forward to improving to somewhere near that standard, maybe one day.
Yeah, what's so great about him is fanboy is that he puts his stuff out and you're like, man, I can never achieve that, and then he tells you how to achieve it. Now that's fantastic and unselfish, and it's just great.
Yep. I guess the other thing too that we need to consider is the end point of our painting endeavours. So some of these people that you see do a single model to win a golden demon or some is it crystal brush or something that I don't
Yeah,
even
that's
know
right.
what they
Yep.
are. And I am imagining that they wouldn't probably do that level of detail on an army of 150 guys, because life's too short for that sort of thing. So, we do talk about this tabletop standard thing, which I'm not really that fond of that phrase, but I guess it does reflect what I'm sort of trying to say, in that, have a think about what you're trying to achieve. Are you trying to do the best that you can do for this army? Or are you just trying to get it done so you can get it on the table and be happy with it and get a game going?
It's a definite consideration. And along with that, I'd mention again what I think I said in episode 1 when we first started our podcast, which is don't not wargame until your miniatures look like these peoples and these magazines, these books, this inspirational stuff that you're devouring. Paint your stuff, get on the table, play with it. That'll make you want to paint it some more. Then that'll make you want to play with it some more. And it's just like a spiral of ever-increasing stuff. You can go back and continue to do more highlights and more details and make that army better. But, don't be afraid to put those miniatures on the table.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. So that's, I guess, a little bit about inspiration and purpose and that sort of thing. Should we move on to buying a box of plastic minis, or steel, as the case may be? Once you've got it, once you've worked out what you want to play, once you've worked out what you want to paint, and you've made the purchase, you've gone down to the shop, local friendly gaming store, or you purchased online, or whatever method you get for getting your minis, then it's a case of resources.
Yeah.
So thinking about where you're getting those resources from. I guess most of us have got a pretty fair idea that US are kind of greenish, and British are kind of browny greenish, and Germans are kind of greyish, depending. But once you've decided you're going to paint your British Airborne or Fallschirmjäger, where do you go for your resources? Where do you look for examples, or do you look for examples of painted stuff, or do you look for the historical content, or do you do both, or something in between?
Yeah, I think my workflow for that is try and find resources that are trustworthy, online or in printed material. So either non-colorized photos or colorized photographs from a reputable source that can be verified with maybe color plates in a book or something like that. So then I'm looking at maybe the original, what it looked like, the original scheme or colors according to that photo, according to that sunlight, according to that theatre, according to how fresh or new that soldier is to the front, and all these other things, of course, coming into it. But then I'll try and find then some painter maybe, or a website or a book or something like that that's maybe recreated that, so I can get a hint on maybe what colours they are, or if I can get a bit of a line in, and then I'll create like a group of possibilities, and then I'll start narrowing it down to what I think is going to match that job. How about you?
Well, first thing that I want to say is if you're painting miniatures and you're going to paint them in colour, which most of us do after all, isn't it frustrating that we live that World War II, if you're talking about bolt action, or earlier than that, if you're talking about anything else, was in black and white, the photos. That to me is just so frustrating. You find the greatest collection of photos of your army, even right down to your particular unit that you want to represent, and you've got some great resources there, but they're all in black and white.
Yeah, it's it can be frustrating, and that search for a reputable color plate or a colorized photo or something can be time consuming and frustrating. Like as soon as I go to Pinterest, I just start going, can I trust this or not?
Yeah, it's like that. I guess I do it a little bit differently. I probably work back the other way and go with the funnel approach, and I get as much as I possibly can. I kind of I a color brainstorm and image brainstorm. I just do a search on the web, various different search engines, because Google's not necessarily the best at everything. And I just get every possible image that I can get of what I'm trying to get, save them all in a folder, and I keep those as a resource. So some of those will be, as you say, some of them will be actually original colour. So there was colour photography in the Second World War.
Yeah, thank goodness.
Yep, some of them will be in black and white, because if you're looking at a tank camo pattern, well, the fact that it's black and white doesn't mean that doesn't help you. It just makes it a little bit more difficult to decipher the actual colours, but it certainly helps with the designs, because colour's not everything. And then I get, photos of guys that have got stuff on their blog, and I painted this, and here's a YouTube video of me painting this, and I kind of gather them all together, and I look at everything. And then I start going down, from the broadsword to the scalpel, and start sort of saying, well, hey, I've got all these things. That's bizarre. Why have they painted that in pink or, bright sparkly green? And then so I toss that out. I go to the next one, and I kind of work my way down from there. At a certain point, I actually quite often get a bit frustrated, because, you've seen that 50 Shades of Field Grey thing as a good example. Yeah. But for those who haven't seen it, maybe don't search for it. I don't know what's going to come up. But the idea is that 50 Shades of Field Grey, and there's 50 presumably jackets lying out, German jackets lying out on the ground, and a photo taken of them, a colour photo, and it's just literally every shade of grey that you could get, from really green to kind of very, very bright, almost not white, but a very, very, very faded grey. And I guess that represents all the different manufacturers, all the different stages of the war, all the different times that they were manufactured, and then everything that's happened to them since. It was the guy posted in the desert for however many years. I mean, it's World War II. This applies to all miniatures, I guess, in terms of painting. But my passion at the moment is bolt action, so World War II pops out every second sentence. But your guy that's been out in the field in the desert, or Africa or somewhere else for however many years, his stuff's going to be faded, it's going to be dirty, it's going to be torn, it's going to be repaired, and it's going to have stuff added to it as things go along. So at the end of the day, I kind of just boil it all down, and then I just go, oh, this is just too hard. I'm going to make an informed decision on the basis of what I've found so far, and I'm going with this paint.
Yeah, it's one of the advantages that fantasy systems need, especially if they've created their own world and not got it under license from some magazine or movie or something, is they can create their own colours. So it's so easy to paint ultramarines because you go and get McCrag blue or the old ultramarine blue for Games Workshop. But you're so right, it's trying to find that colour and narrow it down. And you're right, you get to things where, and I've seen people raging on painting Bolt Action or Bolt Action International or wherever it was that I saw it, not even got those sites, by the way. It was on one of those sort of Bolt Action Facebook pages, and I remember someone raging at, why do painters always paint German putties as a sort of khaki colour when it was actually field grey like the rest of their uniform, and just having a good old rage about it. And it's just comes down to the fact that people are painting it differently to break up that massive colour of field grey.
Yeah, and I think the Fallschirmjäger too, without trying to induce any sort of hate mail, my understanding is that most of the way through the war, the Fallschirmjäger, which I recently painted, didn't have blue pants. They had field grey pants. They didn't keep the blue from the Luftwaffe uniform. They actually went away from that. But they look nice in blue pants. It really it really offsets the colour. And if you want your stuff painted with blue pants, or brown pants or khaki pants or whatever, then just paint it in khaki pants, because ultimately it's you that's going to be enjoying it or not enjoying it.
Yeah, for sure. So what other painters do you really get into? Like, is there some guys that you mentioned already, you find them as a bit of a resource. So is there particular people that you really like to look at?
Yeah, so I get onto YouTube and watch painting guides there. Part of that, I guess, to derail your question, part of that depends on the colours that the brand of paint that they use. So a lot of guys use and do their YouTube stuff in Army Painter
Yeah.
paints. I don't use Army Painter. I use Vallejo, and that's because I hate Army Painter. No, it's not really. It's just because the local model shop that's nearest to me that I could get my paints from, at 2 pots at a time whenever I needed them, they had Vallejo. And so I just started on Vallejo, and now that I've got Vallejo, unless it's a specific thing like a face or whatever else, I'm just going to paint with Vallejo now until the end of time.
Yep.
So that's a lot of the thing that makes a decision on what painters I follow, although I could still, of course, get tips from them. But I'm looking for the guys that are painting the same colours as me, that really help out. But when I first started painting, the person that I enjoyed watching the most was Chrissy from Wargame Soldiers and Strategy YouTube channel, and so I really enjoyed that because she was painting in real time, and so not only was I getting the colours and things, she was using Vallejo, which was made sense to me. It wasn't Greek, some other manufacturer's colour, but it allowed me to watch what she was actually doing technique-wise. So I was getting a lot out of it. Firstly, she seemed to make sense. She explained it reasonably well. Secondly, it was real time. I could watch it. I could watch her techniques. Thirdly, she was using the right sort of paint, and then I guess another fourth thing that I'm kind of conscious of is the how much they're zoomed in, so actually how much you can see. So a lot of the YouTube stuff is pulled back, like they need to sort of zoom their camera in so you can actually see what's going on. So that was another factor as well. So getting all those things aligned, she was the first one that I watched. Since then, there's been a few others, which I'll come onto in a minute. But in terms of tanks, the guy that I'm getting the most out of at the moment, because I'm just on a bit of a weathering streak, and we'll talk about that later with my annual
weathering streak.
weathering streak. Oh, God. Is it still funny if you did a pun but you actually didn't realise it?
Oh, hey frog, you suck.
Oh God, let's not go there again.
Waldorf and Statler approve.
Yeah. So check out the last episode if you want to hear about the Muppet Show. Features quite prominently in about the middle section of that. But so Panzermeister 36. So that's a channel on YouTube, and he does really good weathering stuff. He is a model maker. And so that's, I guess, an important distinction that you need to make. Do you think, Dan?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I like that guy too, very, very much. And I've picked up loads of interesting weathering stuff for tanks off him as well, Rex.
Yeah, so I watched this one. I think I mentioned this before as well. I watched this one, and it said, so what you do is you put these dots here, and then you get the oil paint, and you just sort of drag streaks down, and you just work your way around the tank. And I thought, wow, that looks really nice. I should do that. And then he goes on, and so it didn't take too long either. It probably took about 4 to 6 hours for this one tank. Okay, but for one weathering step on one tank, it was like okay. But I was able to boil down the essence of what he was saying, and apply that to my own stuff, and do something that I felt was reasonable in terms of time investment. And at 156 scale, which is the scale that we play in for armor and vehicles in bold action, I'm not sure that extra 4.5 hours investment would have made a huge difference anyway. So So it's worthwhile just remembering what that person is doing. And I guess going back to Chrissy at Wargame Soldiers and Strategy as well, she did an episode later in the piece about armies that she had painted, and there kind of wasn't any. So she was just mainly painting individual models. And although her individual models were really great, I had to sort of go, oh, okay, that's interesting. So I took what she said, kind of put that with what I thought, and then went forward from there.
Interesting. I have a few favourite ones as well. So from blogs and stuff like that, I follow Brian Cook and the team at WWPD, Patch and those guys, and their step by steps. I found that really interesting.
And Brian Cook's moved now with the sort of WWPD's kind of going extinct, and he's moved to paint all the minis. That's worthwhile saying, I think. So that's another YouTube channel / blog / website, and he's putting all his content on there now. So just sorry to interrupt there, but that's worth probably mentioning.
Yeah, absolutely, because we want to hopefully point people in the right direction if they want some more inspiration, or in this case resources. There's a guy on a couple of blog spots. There's a Morteres Buntvelt blogspot, and a guy Wargaming with Silver Whistle. Love his stuff too.
Wargaming with the Silver Whistle. He's the guy that wrote the book Winter War something.
Winter Wargaming. Yep, the Winter setting the scene. Winter Wargaming, and he's Pat Smith. His name is, and he's doing a actually Mediterranean one, which I think is due out at the end of this year. So that's going to be really exciting for me.
Yeah, that's his terrain boards are they're second to none. They're fantastic. They're really nice. So yeah, if you're looking for terrain stuff, just to give us another diversion on the diversion that we were going on. I mean he paints miniatures as well, and I love his miniatures too. So that's good. I also have a scale modelling guy that I like, and this one's like a figure painter, and he's on YouTube, and his name is Ian E, as in Echo. Just Ian E, and he's done some stuff on there, including a Tropical Fallschirmjäger, which I found handy when I was doing my Tropical FJ, and a few other things on there. So yeah, really good. He tends to do larger scale models, so maybe 30mm or 40mm models, something like that, and upwards, sort of busts and stuff like that. He does occasionally in that as well. But found it really interesting because he uses Vallejo paints for that too. So yeah, really handy. There's a guy, James Wapple, which I'm sure everybody probably knows on here, and I find his stuff amazingly interesting. He's got Wapelius at Blogspot. That's his blogspot, and really, really good. And also his YouTube channel is good, but he doesn't often post up there. He prefers Blogspot. But yeah, really interesting, and he sort of paints. He doesn't shade down. He doesn't highlight up. He shades down. Really, really interesting how he paints. It's a reverse from, I would say, the majority of us, in fairness, from what I've seen people painting, and gets this amazing effect. Yeah. So that's my sort of resources that I sort of go to, as well as the magazines and stuff that we mentioned previously, I guess. Great stuff. And Another area that I look for is sometimes I'll search for paint guides specifically, and there's a number of different sites that have paint guides, including Valhalla Games actually. But there's a number of guys that have got really paint guides that have been around for years and years and years and years, and they're a good time to start, a good starting point. Sorry, but what I tend to find is I guess moving on maybe to colour choices. Is that all you wanted to say about resources at this point?
Yeah, I think so. Because you're finding some probably your colour choices and paint choices and that from there. So yeah, let's go on to colours and paint.
So once you've got all these guides and resources and bits and pieces, everybody's got a different colour for the same thing. And sometimes you'll get 2 guys or 3 guys that'll agree that German jackets are going to be this colour highlighted with that, but a lot of the time you don't. A lot of the time people are got a lot of different colours, and so what I find is I pop them into a little spreadsheet where it's relevant, just a 3-column spreadsheet, and then I've sort of got it all on one page, and I can go, hey, well, yeah, that's interesting, but I might go with this one for this, and I might go with this other guy's thing for this, and then boil it down that way. I don't do a lot of, I guess, direct color matching. What about you, Dan? What do you do for your colors?
I think I do the same as you. I look into what people's brands are using, so availability for me, either in my box of paints, to see what I have available, or availability as in buying it, getting it to me, and on an ongoing basis as well. So that dictates maybe a brand. And then I look at colours as well and go, maybe try and put 2 and 3 together. Maybe test models. We talk about that later. But yeah. So for me, it starts that way too. I guess narrowing it down to a brand, and then a few colours within that brand as a bit of a palette, and then sort of seeing how it's going to work out.
I never realised how bad I was at colour until I started painting miniatures, particularly World War II stuff, because as you said before, if you're painting a dwarf from the Iron Hills or whatever, then sure, you paint his red bonnet, whatever colour you want to paint it, so long as it's red, because all dwarves have to have a red bonnet. But World War II stuff, you want it to be right, in inverted commas, yeah?
Oh, yeah. Otherwise we're going to count your rivets.
That's right. You might be asked to leave the building.
Yep.
Partway through a tournament. So, in all seriousness, again, paint what you like the look of. Try and keep it historically accurate. But if you decide that those guys are were really a bit more that color and a bit less of that color, then sure, just paint them that way. But one time, I decided I was going to paint a tank in a certain color, and I got a color plate off the net, probably off Pinterest or something like that, which is a good source of those types of things. But I think it was probably originally from an Osprey book or something like that. So it was like an oil painted or watercolor painted plate that was in a book at some point.
Yep.
And what it is, I printed it out on my color printer.
Yeah.
Piece of photo paper, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if you've seen this before, Dan. If you have, you'll be starting to smile by now. But I printed it out, and then I got the paints out, and I thought, right, well, I'm gonna get the paint. I know the paint's gonna be different when it dries, so I'm just gonna put a couple of daubs here of this paint on the hull of the tank.
Yeah.
So I did that, and it wasn't quite right. So I got the other paint I had, and then I put that on, and that wasn't quite right either. And then I thought, well, if I mix those two paints, and I don't want to go silly about it, so I'm going to go with a 50-50 mix or a 75-20 mix, something like that, or a 2/3, 1/3 mix, because anything else is just getting silly. So I tried all of those combinations, and that didn't work either. So then I went and got another colour paint and added it in, and I thought that would be good. And I have this thing still pinned to my notice board. Maybe I'll be brave enough to post a photo of it on the blog, of this just completely coloured Panzer IV tank, camo tank, late war camo tank, completely covered in little dots of Vallejo paint, trying to work out the colour schemes. And oh my gosh, what a nightmare. I realised that I actually had no idea about paint colour at that point. So I don't know if you got any hints or tips for me there, but I kind of did the cheapskate thing after that and went, well, these three guys are using these three paints. I'm going to use one of those, whichever one I think looks the most accurate. But do you have any tips for colour mixing and colour choosing?
Yeah. So basically, my tip is until you're getting used to what you're doing or gain more experience, my advice is to use paints without mixing them, and find the paint color that you want, maybe by finding a color scheme that you want that somebody's painted it, where they declare what paints they've used, what primer they've used, all that sort of stuff, and then just use it without mixing any paints, and make yourself happy. Make yourself happy and avoid coloring in that and connecting the dots on a page.
So even after I did that, right, I sprayed this 15mm Panzer IV that I had at the time, because I was at that point going to play a different game system in 15mm. until you corrupted me into 28 mil. So my wallet thanks you for that. So I painted this tank, and it wasn't right. It was completely wrong. So I painted it again, and I painted it 4 times. I spray painted it 4 times, and even with the airbrush, it was so thick and gluggy that you couldn't actually see any of the markings in the hull, like the hull lines anymore. There was no point washing it because there was no lines to actually take the wash.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your Zimmer was all filled in, was it?
It was, yeah. It was a very frustrating thing. So after that, I've really gone back to, as you say, just following somebody else's. But interestingly, now that I'm doing my weathering, oil wash weathering, I've started going back the other way again. But we'll come on to that in a while.
Yeah. So another thing I think you have to be aware of with colour choices and stuff like that. With so let's talk about stay in our lane for Vallejo, because we're talking about Vallejo a lot. Is if you have an air paint versus a brush paint as intended by the manufacturer. So for instance, Vallejo Model Air and Vallejo Game Color and Vallejo X and Vallejo Y. So the same color is likely going to be, in theory, the same color by name is likely going to be a very different color across those two types. So for instance, Burnt Umber is very different between Vallejo Model Air and Vallejo Game Color, and Dark Yellow or Dunkelgelb is very different between the two. So this is just
Middlestone as well. I know that because I painted that tank 4 times and it was based on Middlestone.
Yeah. So this is where experience comes in, but also, tap into somebody else's experience. Use those YouTube videos. That's why we've got this amazing resource that we never had before. You can see these things, and if you find something good, stay in your lane. If you find something that's really happy, why reinvent the wheel? I just encourage YouTube people out there to give us a quick shot of the paint you're using. Instead of talking about it, give us a quick look at the bottle or something so people can skim through your video back to it when they're looking at it for the 15th time and have the 5 seconds that you've held it up in front of the camera. That's my top tip for people doing a YouTube video.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting point. And as I sit here down at my podcasting desk in my dedicated studio for that purpose, which I obviously don't have, I'm surrounded by tripods, Bunnings lamps, and other paraphernalia getting set up to actually do my first YouTube video on weathering, Rex's Guide to Simple Weathering. So whether or not that transpires will depend on how frustrating I find the whole process. But along the way, I'll make sure I hold the bottle up for you.
Sounds good. Yeah, please do. Because when you're skimming through, because you can see the previews as you're skimming it through, you can actually see where they hold the bottle up in front of the camera. So hold it there, 5 seconds, talk about the colour, but show us the label as well.
Good point. I like it. One thing I've also realised about colours, maybe I'm just about done on my vast experience with colour now, but I will share this little tip with you, is that I've found as I've matured as a painter that the base colour that was super, super important before really is not that important at the end. I mean, I guess it gives you the colouring, but the last guys that I did that I painted up, which was my British 8th Army, I painted them in one colour base coat, but by the time I'd washed it with a colour that changed the colour of it, as well as changing, as leaving some wash in the folds, and then as I highlighted it up using different additives to that original base colour, the original base colour wasn't as important as what I thought it was in the first place. And I've seen that too with my my recent vehicle stuff too. I wasn't really overly happy with it, as you know. I used some paint and wasn't real happy with the result. Put them in the drawer for 6 months before I could bear to come back to them. And then once I put a bit of wash on it, changed the colour completely, more or less like a glaze. And then when I added an actual wash, like a pin wash type thing, then that changed the overall colour again a little bit. And then I added something else on it. So in the end result, I was able to build up from something that I wasn't overly happy with to something that I was really happy with. So Yeah,
Yeah,
you
good.
might find it's not as important as what you think. That's my one tip.
Yeah, and generally, I think if you're going to be washing things and stuff like that, then start with a lighter base color than what you expect, because you're going to end up with it coming down to the spectrum, the part of the color spectrum that you want it to be, rather than starting with the ideal finished color and then you're washing and it goes much darker. So that's a top tip that applies to all colors if you're going to be washing and stuff like that, I reckon.
And I think we've got a ways to go on the washing front too, as a community. I think a lot of people in my very humble, still quite a beginner type painting as a painter. I think we wash in general too heavily, and we leave, especially the people that do the dip thing. But even when you brush it on and you sponge a little bit off with the brush, a lot of people are leaving their models too dark, in my opinion. And often when you're wargaming, it's not perfect conditions. You don't have lots and lots of light. And what looked great under your magnifying glass with the light in it, you really need it to be almost a little bit oversaturated, is that the word? But sort of brighter when you're wargaming, because otherwise you lose those details and you lose the ability to be able to for that model to pop on the table. So that's another thing that I'm learning as I mature.
Yeah, I think so, and I think a key person or persons for that to look at, if you are going to champion that effect, which is not to everybody's taste, but to a lot of people it is, including me, and I think you, is you could look at our men Patch and Brian Cook, and they really, in particular, Brian chooses some colours. So, if you look at his Soviets and his Germans and stuff from the latest Fortress Budapest book, and really some of the final highlights are wildly, almost off colour from what you'd expect, but they just look so right because he continues it throughout the whole army, vehicles and everything, and so he doesn't have a realistic tones to his vehicle and then has these almost ethereal sort of highlights on figures. He does it all across the whole range of his army, and it ties it all together. It looks brilliant. It's not to everyone, but I really think it's great. So
Yep, I agree. All right, next on my list of things, are we done with colour choices for the moment?
yeah, I think so.
Next on my list is actually test models, but before we move on to that, once you've worked out your colours and you've got a bit of an idea, kind of a good idea to maybe write them down or record them in some way, because I've had situations where I've done a test model, been absolutely perfectly happy with it, and then found that I'd never got back to doing the rest of the army for a couple of months, and I've actually forgotten what colours that I used, which is, as you can imagine, incredibly frustrating to actually have to go through that entire process again. So you record your stuff. I imagine, being the high-tech guy that you are, Dan, you probably have some sort of cloud-based AI interactive thing for recording all your stuff.
Yep, I definitely do. It's called a Mark I pencil and a notebook, ring-bound notebook, impact notebook from Warehouse Stationery that I got for 99 cents, and I write down all my colour choices and stuff, and it's easy ring-bound, so if I change and I can pull it out without losing all the others, if it's a winner and it goes ahead, then I can either rewrite it nicely, or I can just continue if it's rewritten nicely in there as it is and leave it in there. Yeah, and then I can come back to it. I've done some commission painting before, and people have come back to me years afterwards and said they wanted something else painted in the same manner, and if I didn't have that notebook, I would be extremely snookered, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm not so convinced about your method, Dan. What happens when the batteries run flat on that notebook, or you're painting out in a park or something? How do you get on then?
Actually, I am the guerrilla painter. I have painted in parks and stuff before. I've painted on holidays. I took the 2 squads of Fallschirmjäger on a trip to Shanghai last year, and they got painted at night. One night I just decided I was having a chill out night, and I painted these squads of Fallschirmjäger because it's what I do. That was a holiday to me, and it's easy to take it. That's my notebook. It's my saving grace. How about you?
Great. Okay.
How about you?
Well, being the down-to-earth guy that I am, no nonsense, just get on with the job. As you can imagine, I've created my own database called Paintbox by
Nice.
Valhalla Games.
Nice.
And it's a relational Windows-based database that allows me to add and removes individual recipes. It has a list of all the paints that I have chosen from the Vallejo, from the complete list of Vallejo, which I've imported, and then I've got other paints that I've manually added as well. And that allows me to track the paints that I have. So whether I've got one pot of Vallejo brown, grey, whatever, or 2 pots or 0.7 of a pot, and allows me to generate shopping lists when I go to the hobby shop. It also allows me to export or print out a PDF paint recipe guide that I sort into order, so that I know whether I'm meant to be doing faces first or faces last, or boots first, or whatever else. But then I am possibly insane as well.
Does it allow you to produce the 1.2 gigawatts of energy that's required to travel back in time?
No, but I've got enough I've got enough computer screens and laptops and databases and what have you running on my desk that I probably do need about 1.2 gigawatts of power to run it.
Right. Okay, so I don't need to stick a flux capacitor on my airbrush compressor or something to actually maneuver this.
Possibly you do. But,
no, but I'm serious aside. That actually sounds really good and really informative, and probably a lot more user-friendly for passing on to other people than my scrawls are in my notebook, which is useful to me. So I commend you on that system.
Yeah, look, I mean, I'm a database guy. It's a bit of a hobby. It's turned into a bit of a job as well, a sideline to my main job, and I guess I use it as an opportunity to hone my skills. Oh, I wonder how we could do this little bit of coding. So it does a few purposes, but for me, I find that my memory is so abysmal. I'll just forget it in a second. I'll go, well, that paint, that brown blacky paint. What? I just won't remember. So for me, it works really well, but definitely not for everyone. I guess the takeaway message is whatever works for you, use that, but please do it. Please write it down, because you don't want to be like Rex and 2 months into a project you've actually forgotten what colors you used, and that's so frustrating. Yeah,
and thanks for sharing yours, Rex, for people, because that is genuinely useful, much more so than my little private notebook. So a really useful resource. Well done.
Yeah, no, I don't necessarily know that's true. Actually, I think sometimes the notebook might be better because you can just have it there and just whip it out and write in it. But the one, as you alluded to before, one good thing about the database is it allows me to print out some nice reports. So as I actually finish armies, I'm gonna share my resources, which I've already done with the 8th Army. I did it with the Fallschirmjäger as well, but I just want to give a little bit of an update on that one, so it's offline at the moment. But if you go to valhallagames.net, go to the download section, and in there you'll see my paint guides. You can download and see exactly what order I paint in. Whether I do the faces first, as I said before, or whether I do something else first. And I think about it a fair bit. I'm a thoughtful guy. Maybe I overthink things, but I tried to write it down in a way that would be the most efficient for painting. And if somebody else finds it useful, good on you. If not, no worries.
Good stuff. So now we're making a test model then, I guess. Well, we've probably done it already, probably with those colour choices, eh?
Yeah. Do you do a test model or a couple of test models?
Yeah, I do a test model. Probably 2 to compare what I'm happy with. And see as a squad. Sometimes I do 2 in the same way, so I can see as a squad how they're going to start shaping up next to each other, especially if there's different things in that squad, like say we've got somebody wearing a splitter mustard jacket, and then the guy in the same squad is wearing, all field grey, I might do two models so they're next to each other so I can really see what it's like. So, yeah, I do. I think it's well worth time.
Yep. I guess by the time I get to the test model, I pretty much made my decisions anyway, and I'm just happy to be painting, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that to be honest, by the time I got there, I'm not often changing, but I have found it useful. Like, for instance, when I was painting my British Airborne, because I was using a colour for the base of the Denison smock called green ochre, and then I tried using a Vallejo flesh for the face. And the two were way too similar to each other, so I actually had to pump up the intensify the pinks in it. So I went for like Bugman's Glow, and I went for the colours that sort of from the Games Workshop sort of spectrum for the face, and went that way. And in that case, doing the test model was an absolute lifesaver. But yeah, it's funny what you see. But I don't normally change a lot because I've using paints that I'm fairly experienced in, or I've got some role model sort of people that I'm looking at their paint job and seeing how they interact with each other. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's probably worth mentioning at this point too, in case you don't already know because you haven't seen the YouTube videos or whatever. But Dan, you're a lot better painter than me partly because you've been doing it a lot longer. But I think you've got more of an eye for it. So I'm learning and picking things up as I go, and I'm happy that I'm improving exponentially at the moment. Yeah, I think some of the steps will depend on how confident you are as a painter as well, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you might be accurate there, and that maybe if our stuff was standard painting torsion, I might top you just on that. But you are exponentially closing the gap on me. The leaps and bounds you're taking is huge, and the gap is now closed to very, very small. So don't be too dismissive of what you can achieve, Rex. I think the next army you do, I'll be getting a rude awakening if we put them next to each other.
So I guess worth mentioning in light of what we've said, there's a phrase that really sums that up, and a lot of it, and that's the law of diminishing returns. And I know in hi-fi equipment is a good one for that. If you want really good quality, spend X amount of dollars. If you want really superb quality, which is only a tiny bit more, then spend 5 times as much to get that tiny little extra 1% of quality. And that's a little bit what the painting's like too, in terms of time and probably skill. Once you come up, when you start, you paint this thing, you think it looks really great, and it's just terrible. But then in 3 months' time, you can look back and go, hey, that looked really terrible, which is great because now I realise that I've improved very quickly. And then I guess the better you get, the less you improve each time you paint an army.
Yeah, and I think that can come down to the recording the details things, your test model as well. If you're watching somebody and they're giving a good tutorial, or if you're reading somebody's tutorial and it's a good one, they will pay the key things for the best return will be in there. So, for instance, if you're doing splinter camouflage, a key thing might be keep it angled, keep it straight edged, rather than blotches. So that's a key thing. If you're doing Denison's camouflage in a Denison smock for British Airborne, one key descriptor of it, and you may or may not agree with this descriptor, but almost the patches overlapping points of the brown and green patches, they almost have one curved edge, and then they have another edge where it feathers away. And if you can do small things and pay attention to that, that is another key thing, and so on. Like your patches of camouflage, pick cuffs, pick joins at the shoulder of the fabric, pick pockets and stuff like that. And if you can stop camouflage dead at that join of that pocket and go into the base material and then start your camouflage in another area, that is an absolute key point that will move you up exponentially to a really better painting position than it will doing it once and doing it right, or maybe doing it a second time and getting it right, rather than spending hours and hours and hours and still not understanding that key point.
Yeah, I'm making notes.
Yeah. So if people don't know what I'm talking about there, I recommend you go and have a look at at a splinter pattern cam on a Fallschirmjäger and a splitter muster, and have a look at the British Airborne Denison smock, and you should see some examples of that.
Yeah, and I guess worth mentioning too, we've mentioned it a couple of times in multiple episodes, but with camo you're trying to be representative as well. Don't try and, probably we suggest that you don't try to exactly replicate that camo, because a tiny little 28mm figure with truly created camo isn't going to be particularly attractive to the eye. There are exceptions to that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Shall I give away another couple of tips then? My other top tip is put less blotches than there is in real life. Another tip to that is quite often, and not all the time, you will be happier with your miniature if you do the opposite to what a real soldier desires. For instance, I try and keep less cam, not zero cam, but less cam patches and splotches and whatever on shoulder blades and the tops of arms, because actually I want that figure to stand out on the tabletop. I will put some, but less. And generally, camouflage, especially, the ones we've just talked about, if you put less blotches on rather than more, or rather than a realistic amount to the cam, the smock you're looking at in a picture, then you'll get a more satisfying effect.
Yep, I'd agree with that, and I've taken more notes. But one thing I'll add again, like a broken down record, is make sure you've got high contrast in your miniatures. You really don't want full camo miniatures blending into the tabletop. Firstly, you'll lose them and you won't know where they are. And secondly, you won't enjoy them when you come back and look at the photos later. So make sure you've got high contrast and as you say, not like what a real soldier would want. Make sure the skin tone is light enough that you can actually differentiate it from the surrounding camo, and leave those darkened pitch black faces for the movies.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got our notes. We've done our test model and stuff like that. So what order do we paint things in?
Why don't you take this one first, because I think this is an area that I'm still working through, and I've got some, I'm sure I can add a few things, but I'd love to hear what you've got to say about it.
Okay, so I think if you're watching some videos and that on YouTube, just be aware that if someone's painting a display miniature and stuff like that, they will go back over that display miniature over and over and over again. Whereas if you're painting an army, you need to be much more efficient. That's why you need a bit of an order to the way you do things. So I try and be methodical. I try and think, first of all, what colour are the recesses or the shades going to be on this model, especially if I'm going to wash it? Can I use the same colour wash all over, or I'm using a different colour wash for the trousers and the smock? And if I'm using that colour, well then can I do all the highlights and everything like that before I wash them, or do I have to do some highlights afterwards? So those are my considerations there. I'll get as much done so when I wash it, it's as close to being not finished, but it's as far down the track. I've moved myself as many steps on as I can. And generally I try and paint things so that I'm painting lighter colours first and then darker colours on top, because the coverage is better. An exception to that is generally if you're looking at small dots of contrasting colours, highlights on top of flesh and stuff like that as well. Obviously, if you're highlighting up, you want to be on anything, not just flesh, but you want to be obviously that you're going to be putting lighter on top of darker. But yeah, those sort of the things that I think about. I generally paint inside out. There's something about the mind and the eye and overlapping that if you paint it underneath first, say where a neck goes into a collar of a shirt, then you paint the collar over top and the inside of the collar and the V of the neck where it meets the skin. There's something pleasing and logical about the eye, and maybe the way it moves your hand, in that you do it in a much nicer way, rather than if you're painting the neck inside the collar, generally, I think. Yeah.
Well, I think in that case, you can shove the brush in underneath, right underneath the collar without worrying about how much you're getting on the collar, making sure you've got good coverage right down in the recesses, right down to the bottom, and then knowing that as you paint the collar, you only have to paint what you can see, perhaps.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's funny the way the mind works, and it definitely is easier as well to actually execute. So, yeah, that's the way I paint things, and I guess I really try and invest as much time into planning to avoid doing it over and over again. Like when I'm using washes and then highlights and stuff like that, I try to. It's almost like measure twice, cut once.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've got. I'm just looking at one of my paint guides here, and what did I call this thing? Paint box. Probably should know that, shouldn't I? In paint box, I've actually got my 8th Army one up, which is my most recent one that I've recipe that I've put together, and I've got things like wash, water bottle, putties, socks, and wood in dark tone. In Army Painted Dark Tone. So I've grouped all those things together.
Yep.
So that I'm only getting the dark tone out. I'm only squirting it out on the palette once. I'm only dipping the paint once, and I guess to try and demonstrate that point. And then I'm only washing up once. Whereas when I get the wood out, get the wood color out, I do all the wood.
Yep.
When I get the when I do the putties, if the helmet's the same color as the putties, well then I do all that at once. So yeah, I try to group things together as much as possible as well. But what I do everything you just said. But in addition to that, I get all my base coat stuff on first before I start washing. So get everything base coated so that it looks like a 4-year-old child's painted it. All those bright colours.
Yeah.
And then
there are some there.
And then
oh, sorry, Rex.
Then I wash, and then I sort of go up from there.
Yeah, good. Sorry, Rex, I almost talked over you there, but yeah, I think that's spot on. One time I do avoid that, like if I found that I can really like wash the majority of a figure in one particular type of wash. So, for instance, British Airborne, I found that I started washing the smock in blacks and helmet with a scrim net and stuff like that in black, and then I started doing the burnt umber sort of trousers, the English uniform trousers in a brown, but I actually found that it was actually better in black. So the once I started finding that, what I did is I just base coated with the brown color, so like a dark sort of reddy brown for the recesses of the face and the skin, and I didn't put the skin tone on, so I didn't put like the Bugman's flesh on or anything until I'd covered the whole thing in black wash, because I'd actually in Null Oil, or I suppose you could use dark tone or whatever, but I just realised that there was no point, because this way I was literally doing the whole model in Null Oil, and then I just had to do the face, and the face I could highlight with wash with the flesh wash or whatever afterwards. But yeah, it was much more productive for me to do it that way, because I did not care where the brush went, because every part of that model had to be covered.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I probably the way that I do things, like I try to follow a pretty strict recipe. I'd be lawful evil for sure in Dungeons and Dragons, but I tend to do stuff regardless of whether it's beneficial or not. So I'll do it in a certain way regardless, and spend more time on it regardless if there's a benefit doing that way. And I have to sort of shake myself out of that sometimes and go, hey, look, if I did it this way, really, did it make any difference? Well, no. So hey, just skip that step out completely, and get it done. So yeah, that's worthwhile considering. Take a long hard look at yourself, Dan.
Yeah, take a long hard look in the mirror. It holds all the answers.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay. You've forgotten to say time spent on reconnaissance is seldom wasted. Yeah,
but that's just a given.
Episode.
That's just a given.
Okay, all right, no worries. We'll skim right over that So while we're on the order of things, maybe we'll just go a quick run through in terms of the order of the entire thing. So plastics, say, because there's more steps involved in that. I get them out of the box. I wash them. That's one of those things I was talking about before. Is there any benefit in washing them? You tell me that you've never had any paint fall off due to not washing your plastics. But I always wash them because it's better.
That's not quite true. I had a Games Workshop Predator once, and the paint did not adhere properly to the side panels of the armor because it obviously had some sort of release mold or something on it. But that's the only plastic model I've ever had from any manufacturer that required washing. That was high quality hard plastic, not we're not looking back into sort of the days of Esky and
Army men.
green plastic army men and some of the soft plastic models here.
Yeah. All right. Well, because you've had one model in your how many years of modelling?
Oh God. Well, yeah. Let's talk about modelling in general. So yeah, I guess 40 years. No, 39 years.
All right. So because you've had one model in 39 years of modelling and wargaming, where the paint's fallen off the plastic, I'm going to continue to wash my sprues.
Sounds justified to me.
Yeah. So wash your sprues, clip them, scrape them, mould lines and all that stuff.
I've never done it, people.
Glue them
I've never done
together.
it. I've never done it since. I was not dismayed or perturbed by that one incident, and I have still refused to waste my time on it, in my opinion, ever since. But to each their own.
Well, that's it. It's demarcation now. So either if you're a follower of Valhalla Games, you're either a Dan supporter or a Rex supporter, and it depends on whether you wash your plastic sprues before you clip them or not.
Team Dan, people. Team Dan. That's more time to doing
Team Rex.
That's more time to do a highlighting. Forget washing the sprues.
Yeah. Actually, my brother-in-law's a builder, and he dismays of my building abilities. And he says, why are you spending all your time on that? That's going to be hidden by wallboard. Why don't you invest your time in making sure that things you can see are done better? But I go with the old adage that our dad said, which is you can judge a man by the straightness of his post holes.
Right. Yeah.
You getting me?
Yeah.
You getting me?
Yeah.
So when you dig the post hole to put the post in, how straight the things are, which nobody's ever going to see because it's going to be covered by concrete.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. So I'll wash my sprues. Wash them.
All right.
Put them together.
Yep.
Use the right glue. Put the base on. And then this is the world according to Rex here. Then sometimes I actually put some basing material on. I glue the basing material on, and that depends. That's a depending question. Then I spray with primer. So I use airbrush because I'm lucky enough to have a garage and a compressor and an airbrush. So I spray with Vallejo black primer.
Yep.
And then I spray a bit of a zenithal overspray with grey primer.
Yep.
Now, before you start on me, Dan, I'll tell you why that is. Okay, because I'm not a big believer in thinking that that's actually going to lighten up the base coat. Because once I base coated it, man, you're not seeing anything through there because I base coated it, but good. The only reason that I do it is because it means that the base coat's going to cover more.
Right.
Cover better, have better coverage over the grey.
Right.
And the reason that I didn't spray them grey in the first place is that if I forget or if I didn't get a little bit of base coat down into the grooves, underneath the arm or, in between some equipment or whatever, then it'll be black, meaning that it's in shadow, rather than me see grey primer through once I'm finished the painting process.
Right. Okay.
And then I paint.
Yep.
And then I wash, broad strokes, and then finally I highlight up and do all the details, and clear coat over the top before the base material goes in, because nobody likes a bit of stray static grass stuck in there, stuck on the face of their British Airborne. And then basing, grass or tufts or whatever you're going to have, sand, and then just a tiny hit of clear coat dull clear coat again over the top just to seal that in, take off any shine from the super glue. That's my process. How about you?
So having not washed my sprues at all, Team Dan,
Team Rex, wash your sprues, wash your
I
sprues.
go into base coating or priming, sorry. Generally I prime in black, although if I don't go in black, I go in a dark-ish colour, so that whatever's in the recesses, if I don't touch it, then it's a suitably dark colour and it doesn't have like a grey or something in there that other people prefer, and that's just my style.
Have you ever tried priming in the actual, like with a colour primer in the actual base coat colour?
Yep, I have, or close as possible to it. So I've used German Cam Black Brown as a really nice sort of colour, and that's equivalent of that in Games Workshop colours is Rhinox Hide, which I think you can still get, maybe not. Maybe it's just Mornfang Brown, which is like a more bestial brown sort of colour. Hard to describe. Yeah, I have tried that. I've tried if I'm doing some crazy things, like I've base coated or I primed a river of terrain in a blue. Yeah, so I have done it with historical. I've also done it with science fiction ones or whatever as well. Like in particular, the Citadel range of colour sprays is absolutely fantastic. I've used the Army Painter ones as well on both sort of like 40k, fantasy, and also historical models, and they've all got pluses and minuses. And I really think that that's a I really think we should talk about that another day on another podcast, I reckon. How about you?
Yeah, sounds good. Like a primer kind of special. A primer.
Yeah. So having primed, what I do is I work out the best way to paint things in my mind to save some time. So I'll when I'm doing my test model, I will have found out what I haven't done efficiently. And my test models are normally not really test models. They're normally the first models of a batch, really. So I'll work out about how many I want to paint at each time, based on, in some ways, the drudgery of colours, in some ways the complexity of things. I'll just have a guess. I like to go a squad, so maybe 8 or 10 people at a time. It's just nice and round in my head, but there have been ones that I've painted that I've done much less. What I do then is I'll if I have to alternate colours somewhere, things like maybe sun bleached clothing like Africa core or something like that, I'll make sure that if I've got the same pose, I try not to replicate poses too many times, but there are some ranges of models that have limited poses, and what I'll do then is I'll lay them out in separate places on my desk so that I've got a plan for painting different colours on different parts of models with the same pose, so I can just mix it up a bit. Am I sounding OCD there, Rex?
No, that's interesting. I never really thought of that before. I know that some packs, especially metals, obviously plastics, you can pose them however you want within the capability of the sculpts. But some metals, you'll get a set that's got 6 poses, or even I've heard of one that had 3 poses, and you get 2 of each in a box, which gives you very limited options. It's all going to look a bit samey. So, yeah, it's quite a good idea actually, painting them slightly different colouring or shading them slightly differently.
Yep, I'll almost lay them out on my bench too. Well, almost. I will lay them out on my worktop, all little rows or stuff like that, so that I can work out, what colours I'm going to paint different things. And yeah, I guess the Africa core, Deutsche Africa core, is a good example to get that sun bleach sort of look, because they've got radical changes in their colouring their clothing, and depending on their veterancy and how long they've been wearing it and stuff. So that's a good example. Then I'll get stuck into it. I'll base coat. I enjoy a lot of layering, but I can appreciate washes as well. Like I will put on washes, and I love a good thorough wash on a model that really like the British Airborne that I used earlier, that example of putting the black wash over the whole thing, that works really well for those models. But also, I put plenty of layers on top of the folds of clothing on top of that as well, so it doesn't just look like I've letting the wash do the work for me. I believe in the tonality and bringing the highlights up as well, especially once you've washed them, referencing your fear that, a lot of people go way too dark with their colours.
Yeah, the murky miniature that I mentioned before is something that I did initially, and I really only just kind of realised that. And with my washes, by the time I'm finished, there's not actually much wash showing really at all. More almost just a black line type situation, depending on the uniform.
Yep. There are colours that layering suits much better, like a single colour uniform, like a field grey. That looks fantastic layered up, because the folds of clothing and stuff like that. If you get a camouflage clothing, quite often the layering starts getting a bit more difficult to do, because then you start thinking, well, the patches of camouflage on the base material, they need to be layered as well, and then it starts looking like patches of cam on top of cam on top of cam, and it can look really messy to the eye. So, it's just working through what's going to work well, and that's where you're either whether you call it a test model or models, or whether it's just the first couple of models in your batch, just keep an eye on that and see what's going to work for you, I reckon. Have you had experiences with that, Rex?
Yep, I'd agree with that, especially the Fallschirmjäger that I did recently. The first couple that I did were really murky and indistinct, again, to use that word. And what actually worked out is that the wash that I put on looked fantastic when it was just over the base coat. But as soon as I started adding the camo spots, it was just all too much. So what I had to do is scale back the wash, and again, just really leave it as almost a black line with a slight graduation. But mainly, when I came back in and highlighted over the base coat, I was able to get more of a uniform finish, which then looked right when I got the camo on there. Whereas camo on top of wash, on top of gradient, on top of it just, as you say, it just looked too much, looked too messy, and you couldn't pick out the camo properly there, and it really lost the effect.
Yeah, I think every scheme, every colour scheme, every camouflage type, everything like that should be approached, and you're just finding the best way, aren't you? Finding a best finish effect, but also finding the most effective way to do it, most time effective way to get the job done, really. And you can change it up, like for my rank and file, I'm using them again as an example, but maybe it's because there's so many challenges and variation in the uniform, but the British Airborne, so I'd use that black wash method all over it and then highlight up again, but I found that actually the very best effect, and I did my character models like this, so the Toon Commander and stuff like that, the officer, I washed the smock first and then put cam on top, and then just did a pin wash, so just literally putting streaks of the wash in on the folds and not touching the rest of the cam on it, and that came out with a very, very best effect, and people seem to like it, so that's good. But
sorry, just to clarify on that, you did the base coat, then the camo, and then went back and did a pin wash?
So I did the base coat of, say I'm talking about the smocks now, so I did the base coat, the green ochre. I did a wash all over the green ochre before I did the camo. Then I layered up the smock and all the highlights of the smock, and then I did the camo over top of that.
Yeah, right, okay. Cool. They certainly look good, that's for sure.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that's the most effective way of doing it, and I realise that the parts that I've then covered, the green ochre that I've then covered in camouflage, is sort of a bit of a waste of time, so therefore not the most time effective, but that's why I did it. Whereas I've done other armies recently, Italians and stuff like that, and it's nearly all, so paint them up, give them a quick wash, but it really is about layering, and that's just different tonalities and layering up, getting slightly lighter highlights each time, and a uniform like that in the field grey, it just looks fantastic when you're just layering on top of each other. Man, it looks good.
Yeah, I think I've got to find a good YouTube video on layering. Not entirely sure I totally understand what layering actually is. I do my own version of it, and it kind of turns out okay, but yeah, I don't like to see brush marks in my work, so must be doing something a little bit wrong. But yeah, it's a continuum, I just need to continue to try, continue to improve. But one thing I've noticed though, on the entire army front, is that I don't think it's such a good idea to change your method, even if you do improve your method partway through an army, because ultimately what that's going to mean is just frustration when you look back at the original models and you see that they're not as good as the later ones. So I don't know, it's a hard one, but for me it's either a case of, I guess, go back and paint the original ones again, which it's a lot of work, or just continue and paint the rest of the army the way that you've started, and then know that when doing your next army or next models or whatever, then you've got more skill and you can do it slightly differently. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's most noticeable when you start out. I think your incremental increases, like you mentioned earlier about your the return you get off things, like if you when you're starting off. Like I've got an Empire army for Warhammer Fantasy that you can see the massive differences in my techniques and skill from start to finish in those Units. Whereas, I'm definitely still getting better at the armies that I do, but you generally can't see it as much. I'm probably increasing skill on how to paint a rifle, stocks, wooden effect, to be honest, or something like that, on that army, and really concentrating on that. I'm getting better all the way through, but it's not as noticeable. It's not as exponential sort of obvious differences.
Yep, that makes sense, and not enough that you're going to notice it over an army of 40 guys or whatever.
Yeah, and I'm painting them a lot quicker as well, which is a positive effect that all you people starting out will be will be pleased to know that it's not always this slow. So yeah. As well as that, I guess there's other considerations like basing. I'll if I want the basing to be the same color, or the undertones of the basing are the same color, I might put the say what you consider to be the dirt or the ground cover on before I prime or base coat, and then cover that in like a brown or black or whatever as well, and then layer that up. Quite often though, the secret in basing is, and this is another sort of subject in itself as well, but the secret in basing is creating contrast between the actual miniature. So quite often you're not going to want it to be the same. So quite often I'll leave it off, especially, if it's a desert thing or something like that, I might leave it off to the end. If I'm painting a darker colour sort of miniature, I'll leave it off to the end, then put it on, make sure it's secure, then dry brush it, wash it, whatever I'm going to do up then. Some exceptions, like, if you're doing browns and you're going to be putting tufts and stuff on top, and maybe some meadow flowers or something like that, well, there's no harm then in putting the actual ground, what would be the dirt on, spraying that brown and getting all that done, and then putting your green grass and stuff on later.
Yeah, I have Rex's patented driveway gravel as a resource. As you know, Dan, from scooping up a few bits of that yourself, it's an odd colour because it actually works for basing material. Your normal basing material, your gravel that you get from the shop or something from the nursery, or something you pick up on the side of the road, or you buy from the wargaming store in a tiny little tub that's about $1 million a ton is what it works out to be. But it's often the colours are not right, and you put natural gravel on there and normally it looks wrong, which is weird because it's natural. So what I tend to find, unless it's Rex's patented driveway gravel, I put it on first, glue it on, include it in the priming process, include it in the base coating process, then sort it out afterwards. That gives you a number of benefits. But if your gravel just happens to be the right colour for what you want, well then obviously it's put it on at the end choice if you're going anywhere near it with some sort of spray device.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, rocks don't scale, oddly enough, do they? Like, you put a pebble or a rock on your base and it looks like it's a pebble or a rock, and so you have to paint it. You have to, I guess, put your little washes replicating moss or whatever, or dirt and grime and that on it, and then your highlights and stuff, and that's what gives it the effect to actually match the rest of your miniature. Otherwise, it just doesn't look right for some odd reason.
Yeah, the way the light falls on it, I guess. Whereas in the natural scale, your eye knows what size the shadows are going to be, what you're going to see on that. Whereas when you see it on the base of a miniature, and it doesn't replicate those types of shadows and discoloring, etc., you're going to know, you're going to see it, and it's never going to look right.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's absolutely spot on there. Yeah, good. So yeah, I've worked my way through. We've already talked about sort of how I paint sort of inside out mostly. That's layering. I guess just trying to use a technique that suits it. Not everything's going to suit dry brushing. Not everything's going to suit layering. Not everything's going to suit washes. Trying to find a technique, and that's where experience comes in, and tapping into experience. People using your resources, your YouTube, your painting books, or whatever the case is, or talking to your buddy down the road, or at the club, or listening to people online, or whatever you're going to do that helps you decide on what technique to use, and working my way through it as fast as I can. But I like to finish a squad or a model and then not go back. I'll go back to base, but I like to finish whatever batch size I'm using or something like that. I'll try and finish that and then go on without basing. I'm happy with that, but move on. I won't come back to go generally to do anything else. Unless I've got them just tabletop ready for some club night or something, to be courteous to my opponent, and then I'll come back and do it again. But I try to just finish what I'm doing, because it's a bit heart-rending going back and doing the same models over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's right. So you paint in a batch. So what size batch? I guess it depends on what size squad, right? But so somewhere between 5 and 12 guys you'd paint at once, kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And then I'll paint a couple of batches, then I'll reward myself with like maybe the MMG that I'm going to have in the army, or a Cooper wagon, or a tank, or whatever. I'll try and reward myself with that, getting through like a big batch of quantity. I'll then go for smaller, more individual type models to reward myself with variation and not the same poses, or not the same colours, or something like that over and over again. Because, if an officer's dressed differently, if he's got a different type of boots on, or P-dot trousers, and everybody else has got field grey or whatever, or he's sitting in the staff car, or all these things just break up the monotony of doing squad after squad, and it's a nice little reward.
Sounds good. So within your batch, do you
Yep.
batch paint? Do you paint all the faces and skin? Then you move on, you go through for that same 12 guys, say again, and you paint all the shirts, and then you go through and you paint all the pants. Is that how you do it?
Yep, absolutely. I find it's just so much more methodical, and I'm not doing it in the whole army of 40 or 50 guys. I'm just doing it in that batch, so it's not that monotonous, but it's just much more methodical, less chance of missing something and going, and having to go back and do it, and it lets me. Now the thing that I said about poses and different colours, so sometimes if I've got if I'm doing all the trousers, well, I might not do it if I've got like a batch that's got similar size, similar model poses in there. I might have out the paint of desert yellow paint. I might use that paint instead and go trousers on this guy, jacket on that guy, trousers on that guy, jacket on that guy, whatever I'm going to do. So in that way I might change it up slightly, but yeah, generally it's trousers, shirt, rifle stock, and so on.
Right, so just trying to improve your efficiency by reducing the amount of times you're washing out and changing paint, etc.
Yep, absolutely. Saving yourself money as well, because you generally use up your paint a lot more efficiently that way as well. And you're just pouring it out and then getting distracted and then using a different colour, and you got 6 paints that have gone off on your palette, and then you have to do it all again.
And this is a leading question, which is going to lead on to me describing what I have. But do you just hold the guys in your fingers?
So I won't hold the model. I'll hold the base. That's why I base my miniatures before I do it. I know there are people out there who don't. Generally, someone will put them on something. So even if it's like a pin type affair into a cork or something like that. What I have got is I spent $14 or something like that on a Games Workshop painting handle, and that thing's really good. But I confess it'd be more of a one-off miniature type thing that I'd put in there. Generally, I just either blue tack them on top of a flat bottle top or something like that, or just hold on to the edge of the base where oils in my hand aren't going to affect the paint I'm going to put on the miniature. What do you use, Rex? I know what you're going to say, but I think the people need to know.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's particularly revolutionary, but I found that trying to grip the little base, again, you don't want to touch the miniature because the oil's from your hands. In fact, I don't even really want to touch the base, but I'd get away with that. But what I don't like sort of holding that because I find my hand gets tired trying to grip that little base and rotate it all the time. So what I did is I went to the local hardware store, bought a length of maybe 25mm dowel, and chopped it up into little pieces, and then I affixed my batch of miniatures to the top of one end of that short piece of dowel, and which that's another whole thing in itself. But so the dowel's about say 3 inches, 75mm long, and then you can just sort of loosely but nicely hold it in your hand, and then just rotate it because it's a dowel, so it's smooth and round. So you can just rotate it in your hand to any direction you want, and it gives you a nice firm base and a nice way to hang on to it. And it also gives you, if you can imagine wrapping your hand around that dowel just below the miniature, it gives you a little base that you can put your pinky from the other hand on, or whatever finger from the other hand on, just to steady the brush as you're brushing in. Particularly useful for undercuts and faces and that sort of stuff. So that's what I did to hold my miniatures. But then the next thing I found is, got a 75mm piece of dowel with a miniature on top. It's a steel miniature. They're a little bit unwieldy, and I don't want it to fall off and smash on the floor. So what I did is I just got some MDF, bored some holes in it, and just made kind of like I don't know, how would you describe it, Dan? Like a
shot glass holder, almost.
Yeah, shot glass holder, or if you've seen one of those MDF things that hold your paint, like a paint rack organizer.
Yep.
Or if you're as old as us, like a milk bottle thing that holds milk bottles or beer stubbies or whatever. Basically, and then what I just do is I just stick my 8, 10, 12 miniatures in that. And then I just grab the next one, and then I just move. Once I paint it, I move to the end of the shot glass holder, and it just sits there upright, not rolling off the table, not getting knocked off, and just ready for me to grab next time. So yeah, I think that works pretty well. I haven't seen anybody else do that. It's not super secret, or it's not going to get us to It's not going to get us to Mars 10 years earlier, but in terms of simple tech that you can apply at home, I think it's quite a good thing. Give it a try.
It's like the greatest spice rack in the world.
Yeah, it's got a spice rack with minis on it.
Yeah.
Captain Spicy, what was that? Episode 1, you were referring to an officer?
Captain Carlos Spicy Wiener.
Yeah, that sounds like it. Yep. So that works pretty well. I really like it, and I definitely never go back to holding them with my claw hand. But if that works for you, that's great. Which I guess kind of brings on the next thing, which we've touched on a little bit, is guerrilla ergonomics in terms of what you're doing. So I have my spice rack / shot glass, and my 8-inch magnifying light thing, and my super duper office chair, and that's how I paint. But if you're Dan and you're painting at the park, then hey, you're not going to have all those luxuries, and just need to get on with it.
I like to deprive myself of flash things, eh? Like your light is like a revelation, and I just can't believe how awesome it is when I'm there. And then when I leave, I'm like, no, I'm not going to get my eyes. I'm like spoiling myself. I go like army on myself, and I'm like live out of my Games Workshop Fast Attack bag from like 2007, and I just like I'll go to the park, I'll put it in my bag and go take it away when I go for work, or I'll take it away when I go on holiday, because painting's a holiday for me too, so if I want to go somewhere, I've taken it to China, as I said, I've painted over there too, so there's a lot to be said for all the gadgets, because your setup is absolutely phenomenal, Rex. I encourage anyone to do it, but treating myself mean and keep myself keen sort of works as well, because I can just pack up my stuff and take it anywhere, and I'm still painting the same way I paint at home. So there's pluses and minuses.
Yeah, that's right. I find it can be a real negative sometimes. So, like all of us who live in shared spaces, I get told to move my painting equipment out of the way, or put it in a cupboard, or what's that doing there? We've got guests coming over. So I find that it gets to 7 o'clock at night, the kids have gone to bed, and it's time for painting, and I've got to go to one end of the house to get my light, and another end of the house to get my big toolbox full of paint, and another end of the house to get my spicy spice rack full of miniatures. And it all just seems like too much trouble, whereas a man such as yourself, lean and keen, would be grabbing the brush and the paint that's sitting right alongside you in the easy chair, and just ripping into it. So there's a benefit to both.
Yeah, I think whatever method you're going to use, I think your actual the miniatures you're currently painting and the few paints you actually are going to use, physically able to use that night, depending how many steps you're going to do. I'm a big believer in keeping those with your brush, your water pot, and a light if you use it, keeping them somewhere accessible, easily accessible in a wardrobe or whatever, so you can get it out and get stuck in, because that is the barrier between doing 30 minutes a night or not.
Absolutely, yeah. I find that soon as my stuff goes away, then it's really okay. I'll just read this book, or I'll just watch TV, or I'll just do something else. So yeah, definitely. You want to be aiming for that half hour a night, whatever it takes to get that done. Ideally, in a perfect world, we'd all have a set up paint station with all these accessories and mod cons that was perfectly set up and arranged, so you could just get on and do it in the optimal conditions. But unfortunately, most of us don't have optimal conditions, or if we do, then we're
single.
I wasn't going to.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure how I was going to put that, and I was thinking maybe, Dan, we should just cut it there, and I'll go back and erase that piece. But yeah, and I mean, that's funny and all that, and maybe not so funny for some, but yeah, you live in a shared space, you have to make compromises. You can't listen to a podcast at full blast while doing all those things, and having your entire tank army out on the kitchen table when you're living with someone else. So yeah. Enough said.
That accessibility and getting that little half an hour done at night, I know that's worked for you recently, and I'll get your feedback on that in a minute, but I find that that helps me keep on track and keeps me motivated, and getting that regular, even if it's just, I'm going to paint the boots on this at this lunchtime, or I'm going to paint all the rifle stocks brown. That's all I want to do, just rifle stocks brown. I got 20 minutes done. That keeps me motivated, because I could see the progress. How about you?
Yep, I'm exactly the same, and that comes back to another thing that I just wanted to add about batch size as well. So in my my shot glass holder, my spicy wiener shot glass holder, I have 16 holes. Now recently I did 17 guys at once, which was a pain, because I always had one that didn't fit in my hole, and that irked me, I can tell you. But what it meant was I was always pushing to try and get these 16 hats done. 16, well, that's not such a big deal, but 16 washing 16 miniatures or doing first highlight on 16 miniatures, it was too much. So that's one thing that I've learnt from my last stint, is just keep it down to about, maybe for me, about 10 or 12 would be the max. And at 12 is quite a push on certain things. You do face highlighting on 12 guys or eyes on 12 guys. By the end of that, your eyes are bleeding, and you need a break. But just to push myself that little bit more to get that more done, 12 guys versus 10, say, but also have it be kind of enjoyable and not too much of a chore. So that's one hint from before. But yeah, having that hobby time each night, half an hour, 15 minutes, whatever it takes. And often you've got choices. You could say, well, hey, I'm going to do faces tonight, or I'm going to do boots. Well, boots is going to take me 15 minutes. Faces is going to take me 2 hours. So I've got a lot of other stuff on tonight. I'll just do the boots. I'll be happy with it, and then I'll move the faces on to tomorrow night or the next night after.
Yeah, good one. So I guess we've done the majority of our models. We're looking really happy. Finishing off, so we're looking at those things that even if you are going to intend to go back and finish the details at a later stage, say you're preparing for a tournament, you're like, I'm going to get tabletop ready. So you might just put a little bit more effort into what they call faces, bases, and flags. But then after that, you got your decals and stuff, which are always a nice way to jump ahead to a bit more detail without actually having to paint it. And
I don't know if I'd call decals nice. I don't know if I'd put nice and decals in the same sentence. But anyway, yes, I understand what you're saying.
Okay, well, why don't we talk about the challenges then? So go on. What challenges do you face with them?
The decals. Gosh, So I'm new to this, right? I'm pretty new to all of this kind of, decals model hobby thing. So I'm learning as I go. But I put some decals, some shoulder patches on some British Commandos, right? And so the shoulder, by definition, is a curvy thing, right? It's not flat, it's curvy. And the decals for those are short, because it's just a shoulder patch. They're not very long, so there's not a lot of give in them, and they're relatively thick. Once you get the decal off the plastic, it's actually still the decal itself is quite thick. So get those decals onto the shoulder patches. My gosh, that was a real nightmare. It was just horrific, and I think it scarred me for life. I think I have decal PTSD, and anytime anybody mentions PTSD, it's like it's like the choppers are flying in, and I start getting the cold sweats and start going to ground.
All right, so all right. Well, maybe how about I say what I do with decals, and then you can add whatever you want to it, and maybe some of that will be of use to some people. I'm sure other people have more stuff they can add for advanced techniques. So, firstly, what I do is I cut out the decal really closely to the actual insignia or whatever it is on the backing paper. So it's on the paper still, and I cut it out with a very sharp scalpel, so I'm not ripping it, I'm not bunching it up or anything like that, and I cut around it, around the shape I want. Now, one thing to note on here is that on a rounded piece of something you're going to stick it on, plastic or tank or whatever you're going to stick it on, obviously certain shapes are much more difficult than others, because they do, if you're trying to stick something on a teardrop shape, say a Space Marine shoulder pad, that's what I'm going to use as an example of. There are some Space Marine insignia that just do not fit that teardrop shape properly, that bends and the transfer gathers, and you start getting silvering when you finish it because there's actually little parts of the decal that stick up in the air.
I'm starting to break out in a sweat, Dan. I'm starting to break out in a sweat. Make it go away.
All right, well, let me tell you how to solve that. So what you do is you cut around as close as you can to the actual insignia, and if needs be, you can actually put a minute little cut in it so that it actually will bend. But avoid doing that by cutting out. So say if it's a U shape or something like that for Ultramarines insignia, you'll cut out the U, the part of the U, the horseshoe shape around it. Don't leave it in that whole thumb shape because it won't stick down properly. So that's the first tip. Next one is put a little bit of gloss varnish if you can in the area of the transfers going on, the decals going on. Sorry, in the past times we called them transfers in Britain. I think decals are, although I think it's a French word, but I think it started in model terms sort of from America, but so interchangeable, I guess. So put your decal, and what I do is I put varnish over the whole panel. So if something happens, if the gloss varnish isn't covered that well or something like that with my matte spray or whatever, then it doesn't look odd, it doesn't look out of place because the whole armor plate is like that, or the whole shoulder pad, or the whole top of the arm is like that, down to like the elbow creases or something like that. Then I'll put on the decal by applying a little bit of moisture onto the part of the model that's being applied to. Sorry, I'm skipping ahead. The decal itself, once I've cut them out, I do not float it in like a teacup of water. Just don't do that, people.
Is this where I'm coming? Is this where I'm coming unstuck?
So what you do is you take your cut decal. It's still attached to the paper backing sheet, and you get your teacup or something with a rim on it. You get tissue paper, toilet paper. You wet the toilet paper, and then you put the decals on top of the toilet paper, and then fold the toilet paper over top, so that it's getting wet all the way through, but it's not just floating around and ready to detach at a moment's notice and getting overly soaked by floating around in the water and drowning it.
Huh, okay, interesting.
Leave it there. Now this is very, very quite wet, like tissue paper, by the way. So you leave it there, then you lift the top, so you fold the top part of the tissue paper back, you take your decal out and you slide it on by using a brush or whatever onto the part you put the varnish on, onto the model. You can position it because it's got gloss varnish, and B, it's a little bit moist. You slide it into position with the tip of a nice clean brush. You can then gently brush off the excess moisture over the top of it, which helps flatten it out as well as getting rid of the excess moisture. You're taking care not to move it at this stage because you're happy with its positioning, and then you let it dry. And then once it's dry, put some more gloss varnish over the top. And then after that, you can put your weathering over top or whatever you want before you varnish it. If you're not going to put any weathering or anything like that over top, then you can just matte varnish it over the top.
And that's all there is to it.
That's all there is to it. Step 27 will solve everything for you.
Huh. Yeah. So I've been doing some of those things. I didn't think about that tip. I have a very a saucer, I guess you'd call it. So there's not a lot of water there to float. I've been floating the decal in that. I haven't had problems with it separating, but I have had problems with it grabbing it.
Yeah. So just use the toilet paper method. You're still getting it soaking wet. It's still working, and it doesn't move anywhere.
Yeah, that's a very good point. One thing that I do have that I can offer, I think, is when you're cutting it out, you're saying you use a sharp scalpel and cut it out.
Yeah.
Maybe my scalpel blade's probably due for renewal, but I've had some dramas in trying to do that. So what I did is I've got a Swiss Army knife. A nice Swiss Army knife, and the scissors on that Swiss Army knife are incredibly sharp and incredibly fine, and I find that I can cut it better and more accurately and more close to the outline with my little Swiss Army knife scissors than I can with a scalpel. So it's another option for you to think about.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
What about decal fix and decal medium? Have you played that game or not?
Yeah, so I was going to go on to that as well. So I won't describe every single one, but in general, there's one that a solution that basically softens up the decal so that it will fit the curves of whatever you're putting it onto much better. Generally, more expensive transfers or decals are the ones that are thinner, and cheaper ones are normally thicker ones. and they need the most softening. But that's not always true, because sometimes there's layers upon layers upon layers of colouring, especially if you are going to like a manufacturer of, say, enzymes or flags or something like that, or colours. They might be quite thicker just by pure virtue of the fact they've got so many layers on top of each other. So using that decal sol, another great use for it is like Zimmerit, for putting numbers on top of Zimmerit and stuff like that. You're almost using it to soften it and almost like thinning it out, so to speak, so that it's becoming less and less a thing and it fits into the crevices best. I do use it. Those are the applications for it mostly. Apart from that, I save my money and just keep on living my life and using the way which I've described. Why spend my money on... or why? Because I've already got some. Why use it on stuff that I don't need to? And you've seen my pictures of my stuff, and I'm generally pretty happy with it.
Yep, for sure. So the only other question I maybe have for decals is, let's say you've got the thing off, you slid it off the backing paper, and you've got it on the model, but it's not quite aligned properly. What do you use to sort of drag it around to get it aligned properly? Because that's my biggest problem, trying to hold the model, trying to hold the decal, trying to hold the, whatever it is that I'm pushing it around with, and the thing's going hard, and it's kind of adhering to the surface, and I'm getting PTSD by the minute. Any hints for that one?
Well, I find that if you've put gloss varnish on it, first of all, you're creating a surface that's allows it to slide without ripping or bunching. And by applying a little bit of moisture with a clean brush to that surface before I put the decal on, creates like a almost like a lubricant, so I can get into position. And I just use the tip of the same brush that I've slid it off its backing paper or whatever onto the model. I just use that to push it around.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I've always been using, I've got the Vallejo decal fix, which goes on first, and
Right.
then a decal medium, which goes on second. So because I've never really done decals before, I thought, well, I'm going to follow the instructions. I'm going to do everything that I'm meant to do. And after watching, 20 YouTube videos on how to do it, I finally launched off into it. And I think maybe that decal fix is actually creating part of a problem. Maybe it's softening it to the point where it's sucking it onto the surface to the point where it's
They do different things,
making it
but I
more
thought,
difficult for me. But I'll have to check it out.
yeah, I thought decal fixes are the thing you put on last to fix it. Yeah, check it out. Check it out, Rex. I'm not too sure. Different brands are doing different things, so yeah, just do what it says on the tin. But I suppose sometimes you can get better advice by not doing that and seeking, a YouTube video or something. So give it a blast and see what you can find.
I will do. Certainly with the bigger decals on a flat surface, it's nowhere near as bad. But you get it, as you say, the Space Marines shoulder pad, where you're trying to put a flat piece of plastic onto a three-dimensionally curved spot that curves away in two directions.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be tricky. But what's the alternative? Paint it on by hand. They're fantastic once you get them on there, and they look really good. And once you get a little bit of weathering on top, so long as you got it on straight, they look fantastic.
Yeah, I have painted decals on by hand. Oh, sorry, I painted insignia on by hand in 28mm, and I just decided to carry on living my life.
You'll have to put up a photo of that Warhammer 40k troop carrier thing. I don't know what it's called, with the painting on the back lid. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah. People can find, if people want to see that, on the Valhalla Games YouTube page, it actually says there's under the Valhalla Games Showcases playlist. I've got a bunch of my painting and that sort of work on there, and like a video, and you can actually see the freehand work I've done on some of those. And yeah, freehand's a bit different. I'd do that again in an instant because I love it. But just insignias, numbers and letters and stuff like that at that scale is a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, for sure.
Doing it consistently, that's the thing. Freehand is designed, so that you can do a one-off or something like that, but doing it the same size, same consistency of an insignia on the same shoulder pad, it just becomes obvious when you get it wrong.
Yeah, for sure. I'll wait a while before I go that direction. I'm less of an artist and more of a wargamer, I guess I'd have to say.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's what we're here for.
All right, well, that's enough about decals freaking me out. Thanks very much. So we're getting towards the end of things now. I don't want to go into a big thing on basing because that might be something we can do in another episode, or maybe we can even do a YouTube video on basing, because I know some of your basing's really outstanding and mine's certainly improving now. I've got that perspective of coming from a beginner side of things, so that might be something we can do. But do you want to maybe give me your 3 tips on basing? Dan's 3 tips.
Yeah. So go for contrast. Contrast with the miniature. If you are putting an edge around the bottom of the base, actually not the basing material, which is like the piece of world that miniature is standing on, if you have like an edge to your actual base, then I recommend painting it in a colour, but don't paint it in a colour that distracts the eye from the miniature itself. Paint it in a colour that lets it stand up. So probably not the same colour as a miniature, a completely different colour that makes it stand up so your eye is drawn to the miniature itself. And the third one, avoid the beginner thing of having all static grass, making it look like they're running across a football field.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. If you're going to ask me for 3 tips, it would be don't use static grass, don't use static grass, and don't use static grass. I mean, that's just our opinion. Everybody's got their own different idea. But I've tried it multiple times, and I bought a few static grass packs, Dan, haven't I?
Yeah, you have.
Trying to get the right colour for various things, and I have found that I just haven't been able to get anything that looks good. It looks like 1990-esque Warhammer kind of terrain. I think, with all the great and, relatively inexpensive for an entire army, relatively inexpensive tufts that you can get now, professionally made tufts. Just use tufts because they really make a big difference to the model, and the static grass just never looks right. It's not fine enough. It doesn't stand up enough, and I've tried all sorts of different methods with static grass applicators and all kinds of things as well, and certainly I'm sure others can get a good job, but I've not been able to get anything that I've been happy with.
Yeah, and that's the secret, isn't it? Doing something that you're happy with and suits your models and the environment they're in. So, all right, well, that was 3 tips for each of us. And another thing which I think we should cover another time too, because that's not the end of our story. I think there is the do you varnish or do you not varnish when you finish, and I think how you varnish, I think that's a completely different, really important episode that we do another time. Maybe we'll do it next time, actually.
Yeah, maybe while we're on the topic. I mean, I guess one thing to say now is, for me, when you go to the show or the game or whatever, and guys want to have a look at your miniatures, it's fantastic that people are showing an interest, and it's a compliment that people want to look at your miniatures and pick them up. But if that person's just been and eaten a couple of hamburgers and some greasy chips or whatever, or even just the natural kind of oils that you have in your hands, it doesn't take long before your miniatures start looking discoloured. So I'd be saying to everybody, definitely before you go anywhere near a table where anybody's likely to pick your minis up, definitely need to gloss coat. Not gloss coat, sorry, clear coat. That's a Freudian slip. Clear coat, and our preference is not in gloss, nice and dull. The duller the better, unless you're doing something special like a flats kind of army from, trying to replicate a specific thing that you've that you're trying to do for historical purposes or something like that. Just a nice dull coat, no shine, takes the shine off it and allows people to concentrate on the Mini, get good photos of the Mini without, getting reflections and getting photos of, all the lighting that's coming around, reflecting off the Mini. So that's my tip for that.
Definitely. Let's not give too much away then, because now I'm excited about giving people our tips on that. So let's make that, maybe that could be our next one, unless we have things come out of our games or something like that we want to talk about the next one.
Sounds good. All right, well, that's a bit of an introduction to painting, I guess, or introduction to our painting method. Your mileage may vary, and things that are said here are the opinions of the painters, and may not be we may not be held accountable or sued for if your miniatures don't turn out bad. And you might completely disagree with everything we say, and hey, that's great as well. But for those people that are just starting out, and I know I've got a couple of friends that are just getting into bolt action, and they've been asking me about painting, and really they don't have any idea, because they've never been exposed to it before, and there's lots and lots and lots of tricks that have been built up over lots and lots and lots of years, and if we can impart that knowledge onto them, that's going to save them a lot of headaches, hassle, and they're going to be a lot happier with their armies. Would you agree with that?
Definitely. Definitely. A chat to a wise man's worth 10 years of living, or in this case, painting your miniatures really badly and throwing them in a corner and never seeing them again.
Okay, another wise saying from Dan.
Something like that. So shall we take a break then, and then maybe they come back and just have a quick wrap up on what we've been up to?
Sounds good. All right, Dan, let's get a drink and have a break, and we'll come back fighting fit and ready to chat about some more wargaming stuff.
Sounds good. See you soon, folks.
Bye.
There should be no fence here.
We could go over it, sir.
Really? That's not the point. Where the goddamn hell are we? 35683. Isn't that the intersection?
No, sir, it's here. You're full grid off.
Is there a problem, Captain Sobel?
Who said that? Who broke silence?
I think it's Major Horton, sir.
Major Horton? What is he? Did he join us?
I think maybe he's moving between the platoons, sir.
What is the goddamn holdup, Mr. Sobel?
A fence! Sir, God. A barbed wire fence!
Oh, that dog just ain't gonna hunt. Now you cut that fence and get this goddamn platoon on the move!
Yes, sir!
Hey, welcome back. Hope you had a nice drink of water, cup of tea, drink of beer, drink of something else. It's probably better than water for you if it's a weekend. Rex, you back with me?
I'm back. I'm ready
Nice.
to spill my beans about the hobby challenge.
Okay, beans, go.
All right, so my hobby challenge, which you set me, was to get my Panzer IV tank weathered before 17th of March, was it? Maybe something like that. And
Yep, St. Patrick's Day, 17th of March.
Okay, and I can confirm that mission was accomplished. And I want to thank you for that, because I have been procrastinating on doing that for a year. So I've got a few tanks, actually, a few vehicles, and none of them are weathered. And it just all looked like too much trouble. And it was like, oh, no, it's too big and I can't be bothered. And oh, I'm going to stuff it up. And so I just put it on the back burner and didn't worry about it. But you know what? Once I grabbed my resources, I got them all together. It was pretty easy, and I'm really, really, really happy with the result. So thanks for that, Dan. Panzer IV, done.
Great. Well done for achieving that. It was obviously all about giving that confidence to do it. So that's great to hear that it wasn't just about that one tank. It was the confidence to do it and all your other projects going ahead. So mission achieved. Well done. And it looks fantastic online.
Yep, and if you want to see a picture of that, you can go to valhallagames.net and have a look through, just scroll through till you get to the 16th of March, I think it was, or 17th of March, yep, because I got it done about 3 minutes before the bell, 11:59 or 57 p.m., and you can have a look at it there.
Nice. And so my mission was to get my two Panzer twos, good lord, two Tiger twos painted up, and get the painting recipe to Rex. So I can confirm that they were painted up. The deadline was the end of March. They were posted up on our blog, one picture on the 28th of March. So if you go to valhallagames.net, you can check that out. I have got Rex, the painting recipe. However, I haven't revealed it to you listeners/watchers on YouTube yet, but that video is very much forthcoming. Just a case of tying it in with the rest of the Big Cat build, because as you would know if you've been watching the YouTube channel, I've taken the opportunity to not only achieve that, but also be working on another 3 Tiger tanks as well, 2 of the late pattern Tigers and one of the early production variants of the Tiger 1 as well. So that's all forthcoming. So look forward to that. So go and have a look at those pictures too.
Yeah, they look good. They look really good, and it's particularly, so you saw mine, right? And it's on a white background, which was great because it sort of accentuated it, and that's that, and apparently that's how I roll. But on your side, it was on a beautifully thrown together miniature diorama with a building in the background, and teddy bear fur and a couple of trees, if I recall. So I definitely need to improve my photo taking abilities in terms of the staging. So you'll have to give me some lessons there, Dan.
Okay, all right. Well, are you ready for your next challenge?
I am ready. Just bear in mind that I've got a week's holiday coming up, and when I say holiday, I don't mean painting miniatures. I mean dragging kids around a holiday destination. So be gentle, all right?
Yeah, good. Okay then. So your next challenge is to assemble and paint the 2 Fallschirmjäger equipment containers with the Fallschirmjäger that go with them, of course, onto bases, based up, painted, and I want you to get that done by the 15th of May.
15th of May, I can definitely do that. That's fantastic. I'm really looking forward to those. So if for anybody who hasn't listened to the last episode of the podcast, these are the Fallschirmjäger that Dan gave me for Christmas, specially cast just for me. And it's Fallschirmjäger with their drop canisters. I'm going to make them into a nice, maybe, I don't know, 60mm objective marker or something like that. And little diorama base underneath it, sized still to be arranged. But that was one of my picks for the my favourite miniature for 2018. So I'll be looking forward to actually getting it assembled and painted up. So thanks, Dan, twice. Once for buying it, and second for making me get my act together and get it put together and painted.
Yeah, there you go. That's you, 15th of May. But I don't think you better give me one just yet. We better go into sort of what we've got planned coming up. So that's obviously now on your pad. We've heard you got a holiday, but what else are you getting on with at the moment, Rex?
So I have purchased the 8th Army 25 pounder and quad tractor for my 8th Army. So that's still in the box. Reason it hasn't even come out of the box yet is I'm hoping to do a little YouTube kind of unboxing / review on that. So there's pluses and minuses to that model, which we'll come on to. But quick spoiler alert: the quad tractor seems really small. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, it seems small to me. Although we've seen some pictures that might be of that quad tractor, and it's pretty darn small. So, the jury's out.
All right. Well, once I get my act together and get this video taken, you'll be able to check it out. So go to valhallagames.net, and from there you'll see somewhere you'll see a YouTube video. Just click on that to get to the link to our YouTube channel, and you can let us know what you think. But that's one thing that I'm doing. Secondly, I mentioned my project for 2020, which I reckoned it was going to take me a whole year to get it done, and that is my buildings France / Normandy buildings.
Oh yeah.
And not a prefab. What do I call it? What did I call it last time? It sounded really elegant when I called it something last time. They're modular. That's the word. So modular buildings. So and of course that's not what I'm supposed to be working on right now, is it, Dan?
Well, you're probably getting ready to go on holiday, so I'm not sure if that's what you're supposed to be working on now. Your wife might tell you something else. What are you supposed to be working on
Well,
now?
I'm supposed to be working on all the other projects that I've got half painted and half assembled on the table. But of course, the grass is always greener on the other side of wargaming. So I've actually managed to manufacture some wall sections, prefab wall sections, and cast them in resin, and then, without giving away all my trade secrets, the next part is the actual cladding for those buildings, and then I'll have my final mold masters, which I'll be able to cast for those buildings, and the buildings should be a 15-minute assembly. So I've done a bit of that.
Exciting. I think you should keep them in the dark as to exactly what that entails for now, because when I saw this, I became completely rationally excited by them because they're that good. And the idea is that solid. I think you should reveal it once your plan is ready, much like the Sith Lords.
Yep, I'll do that. I don't know about how exciting it really is, but if it enables me to fast build some modular buildings for a D-Day board, then that'll be great. If it maybe extends out into something that I can sell a few of on eBay or whatever, well, yeah, that's even better still. But more info to follow on that. So I've been doing that. The other thing I've been doing is setting up for some video photography for YouTube. Man, that's not as easy as what you think. I've got a good camera, and I should be able to get good videos, right? But it's way more complicated than what I gave it credit for. So anyway, I've been doing hours and hours of that, setting up tripods and lights and working out metering and bits and pieces, because I wouldn't be happy with just your standard video. I want to get awesome video.
Yeah, I love the way that it's a constant surprise to us how difficult YouTube is when we've got an active channel that's we've done all these movies and stuff on it, but it is a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, I know we don't really have a lot of family videos in our family. It's a constant joke, because what tends to happen is getting everything aligned for like a 30th of a second shot or a 60th of a second shot is one thing. Getting everybody to stand and walk and speak and be quiet and whatever for a 30-second shot, then that's a whole nother thing. And I guess a little bit of that's overflowing into the YouTube production side of things. So yeah, definitely in learning mode for that.
Yep. So I'm looking forward to you getting those French buildings done, Rex, because I'm looking online and I've seen some nice ones. I can tell you I've looked at 200 million places, and I've seen some buildings, and I'm just looking forward to you getting done, because I know they'll be done right, and I'm hoping I can purchase some of those off you. And I'm hoping, of course, some of the prototypes or originals end up on a gaming table for us to play on together.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. But as I say, I won't go on and drone about it forever, because it's still in the genesis of the project. But yeah, so that's about me really. And that's about me for hobby anyway. What about you, Dan? What have you got on the board in terms of coming up for hobby?
Okay, so hobby-wise, I'm just finishing off a couple of detail works on some of these big cats, so that I can film that YouTube clip, but they're pretty much finished. After that, I was looking forward to moving on to something completely different. I still need to move on to something completely different. I have got on Grey Knights from my friend Graham. I've got Warhammer 40,000 Grey Knights Terminators that I have to paint, so that's completely left field. But as well as that running concurrently, I need to get my butt into gear, because on the 8th and 9th of June, which is the closest weekend to D-Day, the 75th anniversary of D-Day, I am taking part in a massive participation game that our local club's running. This is a Christchurch wargaming club here in Christchurch. It'll be at the Woolston Club, and we've got basically guys who collect the uniforms and weapons and stuff like that from the period. They're going to be represented there. We're going to have a massive participation game set up. In my job, I'm in charge of the 6th Airborne Division troops. And I've got the army list through from Tony, who is the organizer of the event, and yeah, he's really thorough. Really love it. He's predetermined what the army list will be, and I can tell you I've got some painting to do. So I need to add another recce jeep, another 2 jeeps. One of which I plan on, or at least one of which I plan on being an airborne communications jeep, just because I've always wanted that, and it just acts as a jeep in the game. So, and probably the other jeep will probably be an airborne recce jeep, but without the crew on board and with a removable MMG on the front, so that it doesn't look like a recce jeep until I want it to, and I can magnetize the guy and slot into that seat. It'll just be like a transport jeep pulling the 6-pounder. I need to make some more core units, some more riflemen, some more paratroop sections. So at my last count, I've got 3 sections to make of paratroopers, 2 jeeps, as I discussed, and 2 attachments of a Sherman 5 and a Mark 8 Cromwell. So I need to get all that done before the 8th of June, ready to go for that. So I'm sort of hoping that my challenge ties in with that.
Okay.
Pretty pleased with cheese on top.
Okay. All right. So I don't know what to give you there, Dan. Maybe you could set a reasonable hobby goal for yourself for this next period for the month, say, and then that would be something that we could.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, I'll post it up on the blog, what my progress is going to be. I'll set myself some small goals, achievable goals, and I'll post it up. I think my first one will be attacking the infantry, or at least a couple of sections of the infantry, then interspersed with some more vehicles. So what's the date now? It's the 7th of April. So why don't we say by the 7th of May, I'll have 2 sections of airborne, 2 paratrooper sections ready to go, and post it up on our blog. How does that sound?
Yeah, I think you better get a bit more done than that, Dan, because otherwise you're gonna run out of time. Maybe at least you could get the armor built by then, perhaps.
Okay, all right. Oh, demanding. Okay then, so I'll get 2 sections painted up, and I'll get the armor painted up. Built up.
Built, yeah, just built. Sound? Yeah. Otherwise, I'm being cruel to be kind, because I don't want you to be that guy that's in the alley outside the wargame tournament the morning before, still spraying up with clear coat.
Yeah, I've been that man.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. But I'm looking forward to that, and my job is to be the video journalist, or recording that in video for people to see in the future, and that will go up on our website as well. Up on our YouTube channel. So yeah, that'll be great.
Okay, sounds good. Well, send it over to me, Dan, and I'll Valhalla game eyes at it and make it lovely.
Yeah, thanks very much.
All right, well, that's a bit to think about. Got a bit to do, but we have done, and some info about painting that hopefully will help people out. You got anything else you want to add for this episode, Dan, or should we wrap it up now?
Now, look, there's a load going on out there. People seem really inspired by Fortress Budapest. People seem really inspired. Salute just happened yesterday. Our time over in London, so I'm looking forward to seeing the videos of tables and stuff from that. They're just starting to come out now. The first views of the Korea models are out with the MASH 4077 models. There's loads happening out there. Everyone's keen, everyone's enthused by the hobby. thanks for listening to us, guys, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Yep, sounds good. We've certainly got a lot on. I reckon we could talk for another couple of hours, Dan. But let's give the listeners a break, and we'll be back soon for more exciting news. And as always, go to valhallagames.net. Subscribe if you like. If you want to get our news, we post every now and then. And you can see what's happening. And if we get a news flash or we find some breaking news, we'll pop it up there, and then everybody will be informed and know what's out there and know what to spend their hard-earned money on.
Sounds good.
All right, Dan. Thanks for chatting, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, stay classy, Budapest.
All right. Yeah, that's a whole nother podcast, because that's a really, really nice book. But stop me now, because it's time to go.
Good night, everyone. Talk to you soon.
Good night.
Bye.
With your permission, I would like to address my men briefly.
That'll be fine, General.
Captain Sobel?
Major Winters?
Captain Sobel. We salute the rank, not the man.
Männer! Es war ein langer Krieg. Es war ein harter Krieg.
You got?
Man, it's been a long war, it's been a tough war.
Ihr habt tapfer und stolz für euer Vaterland gekämpft.
You fought bravely, proudly for your country.
Ihr seid eine ganz besondere Truppe,
You are a special group.
die ineinander einen Zusammenhalt gefunden hat,
You found in one another a bond.
wie sich nur im Kampf entwickeln kann.
It exists only in combat.
Unter Kameraden,
Among brothers,
die Fuchshöhlen geteilt haben,
who've shared foxholes.
die sich in schrecklichen Momenten gegenseitig gestützt haben,
Held each other in dire moments.
die den Tod zusammen gesehen haben und gemeinsam gelitten haben.
Who've seen death and suffered together.
Ich bin stolz, mit euch gedient zu haben.
I'm proud to have served with each and every one of you.
Sie alle verdienen ein langes und glückliches Leben in Frieden.
You deserve long and happy lives in peace.